I hope everyone's having a good week so far. We are going to be meeting tomorrow, so you'll need to review this lecture. We've been talking about the digital divide, the idea and notion about whether or not, this is something that certain individuals have, basically pigeonholed and used this as a term to really stereotype a group or groups of individuals. So what we're going to talk about is the digital divide. Is there really one? Or, if it is, how did it start? So what about Generation Y? Those are individuals born between 1980 and the late 1990s. One researcher spent 8 years researching over 80,000 individuals to dispel certain myths. There are 7 myths surrounding Generation Y. What are they? Part of what I want to discuss on Thursday, and I'd like everyone to research this, is that what are the 7 myths? And, specifically, do you agree with them? If you don't agree with them, why don't you agree with them? And, in terms of, some of the discussions we've already had regarding, the current, climate about this idea of natives versus immigrants. And then you've got, the net generation, the millennial generation, which really the net and the millennial are one and the same. We seem to have overlapping, years of which they say it started in this year and this is the millennials and so on. So there's a lot of discrepancies. So part of what you're charged with is to look at the 7 myths surrounding Generation Y. And since there are 7 of them, I would say that if you can each one of you come up with 2 a piece, and hopefully they're not the same 2, but come prepared to, if someone already has the myth you have, be able to talk about some other myths. So again, there are 7 myths surrounding Generation Y. What are they? And again, you're going to be speaking to it from a position of what your research has shown. And again, I've looked at what you guys have posted in the discussion thread. I wasn't surprised, Joe, about your statement about Prensky. In fact, I knew when I picked that article and I read it myself that it would only solidify your opinion about Mark Prensky. So I'm going to be interested to see what you think about these 7 myths surrounding Generation Y. So is there really a divide, or is it manufactured? We've spent a lot of discussion that stated that, it's been manufactured. Is there research that supports this? Why is this so popular? Or is this just a Prensky issue that's made him a ton of money? We don't clearly have researchers coming out and talking against the idea that there is a manufactured divide. There are those that not quietly, but they dance around, specific issues related to the divide. And we talk about these in areas of socioeconomic, circumstances. We talk about it, via the actual divides between age groups. And as we've had in our discussions, we discussed the fact that, those can be very much a stereotypical, piece, not an actual fact-based piece. Do we hold researchers accountable for what they purport? Because again, in all of our discussions, you come up with research that says, things to the contrary about the divide. So I happen to personally believe, by much of the research that I've been doing here lately, that there is a manufactured divide. And I think that the issue is why. And, again, there's accountability. And so far, I think that that's something we dance around and we don't actually do anything about. So what we need to do to be able to dispel this myth is we need to debunk the digital divide. Fact or fiction? Shouldn't we have questioned this? And I'm not talking us, specifically. I'm talking about the general public, because it seems to me that there has been so much so much discussion surrounding the digital divide, and again, so many books and articles that cite Mark Prensky, as we discussed last week in class. His name comes up in almost every article. I mean, they use his research to support what they are writing about. So does that mean that they all blindly believe that there is a divide? Well, I wonder, we're not questioning more about this, and why they're not doing their own research. It didn't take me too long to find some research that really was based in fact and not in fiction. So was this meant to cause a divide among the rich and the poor? Some of the research I found here just recently discussed a very specific goal, which was to divide the rich from the poor, the have and the have-nots. And that, as we discussed last week, it's not necessarily going to be the poor that do not have the technology. They may not have computers in the traditional sense, and I think a lot of the articles that we've talked about and the ones that we've even read on our own is that they're using the numbers of computers to base their findings on whether or not there is a digital divide. But we have to get out of that box and look at what is technology, who is using technology, what they're using technology for, and are they gaining, a value from the technology that they have. Again, we're terming this by numbers of computers, laptops, as to whether or not they have them. And quite frankly, we had the discussion that the poor don't always have that, but they very well have, a smartphone that can do a lot of what computers can do in this day and age. So I think that there's the research needs to kind of move outside of the traditional confines of numbers of computers to numbers of devices. That includes all the mobile devices. Who's gaining from this movement? So if we keep, perpetuating the myth that there is an actual digital divide, who gains from the movement? And where was the empirical evidence that supported that there was an actual digital divide? I would assert that there wasn't a lot of empirical evidence. And again, go back to some of the articles that I've assigned, look at the articles that you've found, and look at what they're using for their basis of data. You're going to find that is more embedded in numbers of computers rather than mobile devices. So if we're going to look at debunking the digital divide, we need to do some deeper research. So what I'd also like to talk about on Thursday is if you have found any information that truly talks about the fact that there is not a digital divide and is backed with empirical evidence. So we'll discuss that as well. How about digital democracy? To me, that's more appropriate rather than digital divide. Don't we want digital democracy? Shouldn't this be the focus? This would also change the way we stereotype individuals, because we want democracy to be part of the focus rather than the focus of putting people in groups based on the year they were born, because that's not appropriate. Where would this take us? So if we actually do believe in the idea of a digital democracy, where is that going to take us? How do we see that developing into change, and how do we see that coming into the picture of debunking the divide? How could this change the way we view technology, or the use of technology, the adoption of technology, the way that we view technological purchases? So if this is something that we think is a possibility, then we need to look at a different way of, I guess, how and what, what's going to be our focus of this digital democracy, and how do we implement it? So if it's simply to look at how many computers a school or a house has based on their socioeconomic mark on the scale, how are we going to change that to make this be more democratic? So this is another topic that I would like to see us focus on Thursday. Digicin, that's what's Digicin. Had to say that 3 times fast. This is taking 4 words: digital, net, native, and generation, and repurposing those words to come up with this new word, Digicin. You guys need to say that 3 times on Thursday and see if you can do it without messing it up. I want to talk a little bit about this, and what do you think by taking 4 terms that encompass a lot of what we've been talking about, and coming up with a new, repurposed, recalibrated term that means much more, much more in line, I think, with what we're talking about for the fact that there isn't a divide, that we don't need to stereotype people based on age, demographics, socioeconomic, ethnicity. We can actually take into account other issues. So I'd like your opinion on this new word, and what you think about the idea that instead of having digital divide or digital immigrant or native, that we have this word instead. So come prepared to talk about that. So we will meet Thursday at 4 p.m. on Google Hangouts. Again, to recap, you're going to look at this word, Digicin. We're going to talk about digital democracy. We're going to talk about debunking the digital divide and whether or not the divide has been manufactured, about the 7 myths surrounding Generation Y. So your articles that you found in for the article you read last week, that is a starting point. You may have to do additional research for us to talk about these terms. So this is just a short lecture, so that way you can spend a little bit more time looking at these ideas and notions that we're going to talk about. So I hope you guys have a great Wednesday, and I will see you guys on Thursday at 4 o'clock.